Last time we talked about Twilight Princess. Today we're going to be covering why I think Majora's Mask is the best game in the franchise. Hello and welcome. It's me, Marls44.
And I'm Scourge Zelda.
And welcome back to part 2 of this series, of this part 3 series, 3-part series, however you want to call it. Today we are talking about Majora's Mask and why I think it is the best game in the franchise. Last time we talked about why Scourge thinks Twilight Princess is the best game in the franchise, and today, well, we're going to be focusing on my opinion. So let's get right to that. So, Majora's Mask dungeons. I guess we'll cover that first because that's what we did last time. We'll just keep rolling with the same pattern. Its dungeons are really, really, really good. There's only 4, unfortunately. Ha! But even though there's only 4, there is quite a lot crammed into all of them, and they're all very, very solid.
Since Majora's Mask is a very crunch-heavy game, like it was made with such a big time crunch, there had to be a little bit of cut corners, you would think, but the fact that there's only 4 dungeons in the game just means that the dungeons that are there just have that much more depth to them.
Yeah.
Like, they cram so much content in these 4 dungeons, it's insane.
It's kind of nuts, especially the last one, where you're just like, who is the madman genius who thought of this? Because except the boss. Somebody needs to be thrown in the dumpster for that one. But everything else, who is the madman genius who did this? Because I want to marry him. Or her. Oh. Like,
so good.
But, yeah, let's go in the order. Woodfall Temple, very, very, very good first dungeon. Not up there with the best first dungeons. So it's not up there with, like, Twilight Princess's. Even in my mind, but yeah, I would argue it's definitely like close. Like it's basically a notch right under them. So like if you consider Twilight Princess dungeons, like if you were to consider Twilight Princess's first dungeon as a S tier, Majora's Mask first dungeon would be an A tier kind of thing. So
I would say
it's still
the
above
best
a lot.
First dungeon. I would say the first dungeon would either be a competition between like Twilight Princess and Skyward Swords.
Yeah, Skyward Sword is. Whew.
But it is not. But Majora's Mask is not lacking at all. I mean, it's much better than Wind Waker, Ocarina of Time, and especially A Link to the Past.
Yeah, it's a lot better than almost every first dungeon except for like 2 or 3. It only loses out to like 2 or 3 of them, which is pretty good. And I mean, like the first dungeon, while I think definitely the thing about the first dungeon is it does act like a first dungeon still. Even though this is Majora's Mask and it's a harder game and everything, the first dungeon still kind of acts like a first dungeon. Because the rest of the dungeons act like the end of a game. But this
Pretty
dungeon
much.
is the only one who acts like a first dungeon somewhat, while still kind of acting like a middle dungeon because there's only 4 dungeons. So you have a lot of room to work with to like, make every dungeon chock full of things and just really good in that sense and feel like a dungeon that isn't like a second dungeon or something. But yeah, the first dungeon it still has that feeling with some of the puzzles and just some of the ways you go about doing things, and then there are other things inside the dungeon, Like, for example, I remember there's a few rooms in the dungeon where you kind of just enter a room, you fight some enemies, you enter another room, fight some enemies, and you get, like, the dungeon item. So you get the bow. And then it's just like, okay, well, that felt very first dungeon, you know? Like, just very simple and straightforward and right in your face because it's trying to get you used to the game.
But then, after...
It still doesn't pull its punches at points because, yeah,
no, not
you
at
were
all.
about to say, I'm pretty sure is what I was about to lead into, too.
Afterwards, it makes you deal with some pretty tough enemies for the beginning, like that Dynalphos, for instance.
Yeah.
And like, the really, really precise shots that you have to do with the bow.
Oh, yeah,
like,
especially,
right as soon as you get it.
Especially, like, before the boss room, I think it is. With the spinning one, where there's, like, the torch in the corner, and you're on that spinning... I don't even know what it is.
That's the main one that I was thinking of, but no, that's not the room before the boss room. That's like... the main hub room.
Oh, yeah, that's the main hub room, I'm sorry.
The one before the boss is that one with a bunch of platforms, and you have to hit the switches to make like deactivate the rings of fire.
Oh yes. Okay, I'm thinking of the wrong one.
Like
my bad.
the beginning of Woodfall feels like your typical first Zelda dungeon.
Once you get the item, though.
After you get the bow, it starts getting a little tougher on you, and it feels like it has its own distinct atmosphere that the rest of the first dungeons of the series don't have.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It almost feels like that the temple itself, the woods that are inside the temple, is actually alive, and this is further helped with like the sound effects that you hear and the music that accompanies it.
Oh yeah. It's
Majora's Mask has tantalizing atmosphere as a whole, but the dungeons and the final hours is where they're most apparent.
Mm-hmm. I 100% agree. And yeah, like you were saying about the dungeon, it just kind of like it's like it's a first dungeon. You get the bow and you're like, cool, and then it turns into a middle dungeon, like you're in the 5th dungeon or something of a game, and you're like, or 4th dungeon or something, and you're like, whoa,
kind of like the forest temple in Ocarina of Time.
Yeah,
where
that was like that too.
Where you're an adult, and the first dungeon you go in kicks your ass, like, you ain't a child no more.
Yeah, it just takes away, like, oh, you got the bow? Cool, you're not a child anymore. Have fun.
Have fun.
And then,
exactly.
I can never say his name.
Uldawa.
Thank you.
is I think one of the best, if not the best, first boss in the series.
Yeah, that boss is
Uldawa.
Really, really, really good.
It almost feels like a duel between swordsmen, kind of.
Yeah. I'd argue someone like Girahim is a better first boss, but I definitely agree that it's one of the like best first bosses out there, because there's not a lot of first bosses that are as interesting and as tough, and just like with the atmosphere thing and the whole thing about the dungeon and its atmosphere. I just said that, but the thing with all of that too, and it's like its cries or what it's chanting or whatever it does, that like noise it makes, just everything about it is very that. Yeah. I don't know if that's like a Pokemon cry or if that's like chanting. I don't know, man.
It feels like he's doing like some Arabian chant or something.
Yeah, I assume it's chanting. I have some fun with that.
And I mean, honestly, for me, it gets a little obnoxious at points, but
I feel like it's supposed to.
But honestly, the fight itself makes up for it and then some.
Yeah.
So I can't really be too mad at it.
Oh, and something I did want to mention before we got into the dungeons, but I'll mention it now because we're here, is Majora's Mask focuses around the bow, which is, I'm pretty sure, the most popular item in any Zelda game, and it's like...
I would say so.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. And
the items focus entirely on the bow when you get through the main dungeons.
Yeah.
All the main dungeon items are the bow and its upgrades.
Mm-hmm. And it's so cool. It's one of the best items, one of the most iconic items, if not the most iconic. Probably the most iconic as well. The most loved item, it freaking milks the shit out of it. I honestly love it. I've never been huge on the bow, but this game definitely made me love the bow like crazy, because
like you always want to have the bow equipped in this game.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that's how much it's used, and you would be surprised at how creative a lot of the puzzles with the bow can get.
Yeah, that too. And we got the next.
It's not just shooting things, but we'll get to how creative it can get when we get to like the Great Bay Temple.
Mm-hmm. And then we got Snowheads next. I do know Scourge isn't a huge fan of Snowhead. But
yeah, for those of you who don't know, I fucking hate Snowhead. But why don't you go on with what you like about it at first, and then I'll say my piece.
It has it definitely. I would argue either Snowhead or Woodfall is the weakest dungeon in the game, which is crazy because we just praised Woodfall like crazy. That tells you how good the last two dungeons are, because they're phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, Great Bay is mixed for some people.
Yeah,
some people love it, some people hate it.
I haven't heard of anybody who hates Stone Tower. That is like a crime against life if you hate Stone Tower. Like, seriously.
If you don't like Stone Tower, you hate Tower. Fan.
Right? Exactly. But for Snowhead, I do know why you don't like it. But even though it is a very good dungeon, I have come to the conclusion that I'm actually not sure about. I used to consider Woodfall the worst, even though we gave it so much praise. But now I'm like, you know what? No, I could see some things in Snowhead being bothersome and other things that we'll get to in a minute. So it's between the two of them, but Snowhead's still an incredible dungeon. I'm not trying to like diss it in any way. It is still a very good dungeon, even though Scourge doesn't really like it. Its puzzles with Goron Link are very, very good. It has...
I'd agree with that.
It has, like, a lot of clever things that just, like... that throw you off and just tell you, by the way, you're not playing Ocarina of Time, you're not playing Twilight Princess, you're not playing Wind Waker. I don't even care that this game came out before the two. You're not playing those games. You're not playing Skyward Sword. You're playing Majora's Mask. Figure this shit out. It's like, it throws shit at you right away where you have to you have to learn and start figuring things out for yourself, and it's not super obvious anymore.
Mm-hmm. And Majora's Mask is a game that does not hold your hand.
No.
And especially in the dungeons, because remember, you have to figure this shit out while you're on a time limit.
Yeah.
From the world being destroyed. So if you're not fast enough, you have to, unless you got like the dungeon item beforehand, you have to reset time and then do the entire dungeon over again.
Yeah. That's a nice thing, at least. If you get the dungeon item, you keep it. So if you have to reset time, sweet, half of it's done. Woohoo! In a way. But Snowhead complicates that a little bit, unfortunately. Because of its mechanic with the whole... the center area that has to fall. Which I do like. It utilizes, like, Goron Link well. And it also just... It's interesting. You can get a little lost, though. I have found. But I like the whole way the dungeon works and how it's showing you it's not going to hold your hand. It's the first one that's like, no, you went through that last dungeon. The beginning was kind of easy. Like, the puzzles weren't super duper hard, but they got harder after you got the bow. But in this dungeon, Oddward, it's on you, man. And it just continues to, like, ramp up through the dungeons, but Snowhead is just... Snowhead's the beginning of that. And I can see it getting a little more hate because of that reasoning, as weird as that sounds. It just popped in my head, where, like, you know, it is that first dungeon that's going to tell you it's not holding your hand, and it could get a little flack for it. But there are some things it definitely gets flack for that it deserves.
That is not... Yeah, but as much as I hate the plays, that kind of thing where we're not holding your hand, that is not one of them.
Yeah.
I will say that the dungeon itself is very well designed in terms of, like, interconnectivity. Like, you could see this as, like, a believable place, and with, like, how the tower works. There's a couple fire rooms in the bottom, and then as you climb higher and higher, it gets colder and colder.
Yes, I totally forgot about that. I wasn't even thinking about that. That's really cool as well.
Exactly. But now I'll get into the reason why I personally despise Snowhead. See, I'm not a big fan of ice places. I hate ice physics, and ice enemies are a pain in the ass.
I
hate ice areas and ice physics as a whole. I went into that in the Twilight Princess video. But in some ways, I find Snowhead worse because in addition to those ice physics, there are a lot of places where you can fall off to different rooms.
Yeah.
And there are just so many places where you have to do everything perfectly, and if you don't, you have to continue the thing all over again, like a lot of the Goron Link rolling sections.
I don't find too much trouble with those. I mean, they're decently... There's, like, a middle range of, like, messing it up and being okay. I don't find it super specific, but...
I personally mean the one in, like, the beginning where you're on ice, there's a ramp, and...
Oh, that one, yeah.
There are, like, freezards or whatever on, like, the left of you that are constantly trying to freeze you while you're trying to jump the ramp.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that one's pretty, yeah, I don't like that one.
Fuck that room.
Yeah.
There are some things where you can't really see real well. Like, you have to know where to use the lens of truth in, like, certain places, and that could, like...
Oh, yeah.
Especially when you're, like, trying to get all the stray fairies, you would, like the room where you're going through ground pounding with Goron Link. Ground pounding on those buttons to to open a door.
Oh yes, that one.
And the street fairy in there, you could just miss because it's straight up into the ceiling.
Yeah.
Like, you can't see that bitch. How are you expected to see that bitch?
Yeah, in my opinion, Snowhead has some of the weirdest stray fairies, like, positions. It's kind of like... It's not obvious, and they're hard to come by at points. For stray fairies, yeah, it's... and the whiz robe's annoying.
Which sucks, because this is the one where you get double magic.
Yeah.
I believe.
It is. Yep.
And that's extremely helpful in this game because Majora's Mask is a game that likes to make you use magic all the time.
Because of your arrows.
In Stone Tower.
Mm-hmm.
And the arrows, and the Lens of Truth.
Yep.
Just a lot of things that you have to do to get through the game use magic.
Mm-hmm. And it does make this dungeon a little harder because you don't have that double magic meter, and you can't really get it yet either.
Mm-hmm.
So,
because you have to beat this dungeon to get it.
Yeah.
But the worst part for me is when you're higher up, or it's like the big pillar in the way where sometimes at the latter end of the dungeon, you end up missing a jump, or something else stupid happens, like, I don't know, ice physics getting in your way.
Yeah.
And you end up falling all the way down to the bottom. And because the pillar is in the way, you can't go the same way as you did back up. So you have to reanalyze the dungeon in its new state. Because you can't go through the hub room now, so you got to go through whatever rooms allow you to change floors.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes some pretty fucking big memorization of the level design. And when you have to memorize a dungeon in order to get through it, just in case you mess up, that's how you know something's wrong.
Yeah. If you guys can't tell, he's a little mad.
And then the more it happens, like, you lose a bunch of health, you lose time, you lose resources that you could be using, like, against literally anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll already have softened you up for the boss.
Yeah.
And then if you waste too much time, you'll have to reset time and do the whole dungeon over again.
I feel like it's a lot easier wasting time in the next dungeon we're going to talk about, but yeah, no, that could definitely happen in this one too.
That's a different case though.
Yeah.
In a way.
But
a lot of the things, at least in Great Bay, if that happens, it's because you don't know where to go or what to do. In Snowhead, it's either get good or fall down like a bitch and waste time.
Yeah.
Which is the thing I hate most about that place. Because I'm not good at ice physics.
I don't blame you. Some ice physics are pretty shitty. I personally don't have that much...
Look at you, Minish Cap!
Really? I don't remember Minish Caps being that bad.
Minish Cap's ice physics are terrible.
Yeah, for me personally, I think Snowhead is better than Snowpoint, because I do not like Snowpoint. at all. Really?
Honestly, the two
But-
are the two are flip around in levels of shittiness for me. But I don't know. Sometimes it's Snowhead, sometimes it's Snowpoint Ruins. Depends on what mood I'm in, I guess.
But I will say I do really love the way they use the Goron mask, and not just the Goron mask, like each mask for the dungeon, like the way they use the Deku mask in the first dungeon.
It could use some,
but it could have used. It is unfortunate that you weren't able to use it against the boss fight, whereas opposed to like this dungeon and the next one, you use the mask you're given for the boss fight. But I guess that just tells you how weak Deku Link is, which we'll get into later. No, it's not a My Hero reference, but yeah, boss by the way. But don't forget about Wizrobe. He's kind of annoying at points, but he's not too bad.
The most annoying thing about Wizrobe, though, is the fact that he's such a recurring mini-boss. You just get tired of him as the game goes on.
Because you find him again in the last dungeon, I'm pretty sure, too.
You fight him at least, 3 or 4 times per playthrough, and that doesn't include, the optional challenges where you have to fight him there, too.
And he's kind of annoying to fight, too.
Exactly, because he keeps teleporting everywhere, and you don't know which one is the real one as the fight goes on.
Yeah.
And then that leads to you wasting arrows, and then he shoots you, wastes more time.
Mm-hmm. But thankfully...
he's just not a very fun boss to fight against.
But thankfully, the boss of the dungeon is great, so that at least makes up for the Wizrobe problem. We got the best boss in the game, really, because it's kind of hard to say otherwise.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but it's definitely one of the most fun bosses in the series.
Yeah.
It's just so unique. It kind of feels like you're in, a bumper car race, almost.
Mm-hmm. Got is just so much fun, and it lets you utilize the Goron mask to its fullest potential, where you're just... It's like the Goron track race, but a boss fight. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful, except for you just go around in circles, but it's a really fun boss fight.
And he throws hazards behind him for you to avoid.
Yep. Falling rocks,
more
electricity, bombs.
Mm-hmm. The more health you take away from him, the more frantic it gets.
Yep.
The one problem I do have with that boss fight, though, is that every time you get hit, you have to rev up again, and then that could either leave you open for him to attack you again, and then you go into a little cycle until you can get your groove back. And then there's the fact that turning and going over the littlest bumps can stop your charge. And then it takes you forever to get into the full charge of the Goron roll.
Yeah, and the bumps are really annoying for no reason.
Mm-hmm. It is really hard to dodge those things, and when you can't dodge them well, you just lose all of your momentum, and you have to get it back.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to avoid getting yourself hit even more, which isn't the easiest thing to do in the world. So that is a legitimate problem of the boss, but other than that, it is very unique, very fun, and just fast-paced and frantic.
Yeah, it's great.
In a way that most other Zelda bosses in the franchise don't give you.
Mm-hmm. And even when they try to give you it, it's
it's not the same.
Yeah, it tends to either be very janky or just difficult and frustrating to deal with, like in the bad way. But not this one. This one's got it down for the most part. Fuck the bumps. But onto the Great Bay Temple now. That dungeon is crazy. Crazy dungeon. Crazy in the good way, because, like, holy shit. So, this dungeon's mechanic is all about... Like, the first dungeon didn't have too big of a mechanic. It was just kind of using the bow to hit the fire and you know, hit the torches with it and, like, shit like that. There wasn't too much. In Snowhead, it's the whole, like, it's that pillar thing that you have to make drop in the center.
You're managing the pillar and making sure that you can traverse to the top of the tower.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things I will say about Majora's Mask is it's very good at making, like, each dungeon is super unique in their own way. Mm-hmm. So much so that, like, each one has a core mechanic that it focuses around, and it does it perfectly, if not just very well. As you know, as said about what we just talked about Snowhead.
None of them feel the same at all.
Yeah, nothing feels the same. Not just, like, the area looking different and things like that. They just feel so unique in their own way, because you're not going through the same shit. It's completely different, and the puzzles are insanely different too because of it. So it's like there's no generic. Yeah, there's no genericness to it. But Great Bay, its whole thing is the water pressure and stopping water, changing the way the water goes, so you can swim because you have the Zora Mask. And
the current. You're changing the current.
Changing the current.
And when you change the current, it allows you access to different rooms.
Yeah. And can I say I've never felt so good swimming in a game before.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that's another thing, especially with N64. Because, like, N64
best water controls in the franchise.
Yeah. Easily. Like, even better than Skyward Sword. So easy to maneuver and get used to and use. It's please do it again. Make it so good again.
More of this.
Yeah. But, like, even for a Nintendo 64 game, that's crazy. I know there's the 3DS version too, although they messed up the swimming in that one. So we don't really talk about that.
As I've seen.
Yeah. But we're obviously talking about the N64 version, and, like, pretty much every single N64 game, if not all of them except for Majora's Mask, any water area, the swimming is horrid. I've played Mario 64, Banjo-Kazooie, I know I've played some others, they're not coming to my mind. Ocarina, obviously.
Ocarina of Time.
Obviously. Yeah, I don't know how that one
Ocarina of Time swimming controls and Majora's Mask swimming controls are like a night and day.
Yeah, like, it's absurd. It was like, okay, we fixed it. We're good. They're gonna be so happy with this. We never have to be this good again. At least if we do it right once, they'll be happy. Like, they're so good. The beaver race is probably one of my favorite things. Just because it's so much fun. Because the swimming is that good. But onto the dungeon. Sorry.
Because of the funny voices that you and I give the beavers.
Okay, that helps, yeah. Check this video out here. Plug, plug. But yeah, so the dungeon's about changing the current. Sorry that I couldn't say that before. I was having trouble finding the word. But it's about changing the current to the right way you need to go. And you go through the dungeon, you get the item, you get the boss key, you change the current, and now you can move along through some of the rest of the dungeon, and then you're able to get to the boss. And it's very interesting, especially with the ice arrows in, like, as part of it, because you could do things like freeze the water. There's even currents, not currents, but there's like water that's coming out of these. I don't even know what they're
Waterfalls?
called. Yeah. There's these like waterfalls that you could just freeze, and like other things like that. You can use the ice arrow. Oh, I know which one. Okay, yeah, you're thinking of the one with like the the freaking seesaw, the scale thing. I said seesaw. Yeah,
and you use the fire and ice arrows to dictate which way which way the scales tip, and it allows you into different areas depending on which way they're facing, and it's very clever.
It is. I was thinking of the one that's hitting the my God, I can't remember names of anything right now. That's hitting the spinning thing at the start. Oh my God, that's what I'm gonna call it. It's not a windmill, but I want to say windmill, but I know it's not a windmill. I know what it's called.
Propeller?
Yeah, thank you. Propeller. Yeah. The one that's like hitting that, how you can, turn the water off and everything. That's coming out of those things. I don't even know what they're called. That one is actually like I actually have no idea. But
there are a bunch of... Yeah, there are also a bunch of, like, pipes that you follow and then turn like the handles in order to change the water flow through the pumps.
Yeah. And like even with the mini boss, for example, you use those ice arrows so cleverly. I love it. It's so freaking mini bosses. Yeah. There's two of them. I forgot there's two of them. I just took that in. There's two of those frogs. On top of the fact there's another mini boss who is the one you fight for the ice arrow, who isn't a frog, but he steals eyeballs, but it's okay. But yeah, it's so clever how they use the ice arrows in this dungeon. And it's why this dungeon is so amazing. It's because of the way the dungeon blends with the ice arrows. And the way you use them and everything.
And it's confusing too. Like, it's a dungeon that forces you to memorize the architect very quickly, or else you're gonna get lost. You're gonna lose track of what you're doing, and when that happens, you're gonna be running around wasting time.
Yeah, but it's such a beautifully well constructed water dungeon. Like, the only other water dungeon I've thoroughly enjoyed is the Ancient Cistern, and that's not a full water dungeon, it's like half.
That's more of like a heaven and hell type of dungeon that just happens to be in a place with water.
Right?
Like, the water is an afterthought. But the Great Bay Temple, it is full on a water dungeon.
And this is what we want in a water dungeon.
It is the kind of thing that the water temple in Ocarina of Time should have been.
Or wishes it could be.
Wishes, yeah.
Or maybe, you know what?
That's a better way to say it.
Legend Temple is what it wishes it could be. I think. Yeah. And Ocarina of Times is what it should have been. Is that, or is it reverse? One of the two. One of the two. But yeah, this, because Lake Bed's pretty decent. I know we didn't talk about that, but like, holy crap, this is like the best water dungeon, hands down. Like, it's incredible with the way it uses the ice arrows, as I've already said, and just its puzzles and everything. On top of the fact the swimming, like we talked about, and just the Zora altogether is awesome. Zora Link is awesome. Zora Link's probably my favorite of the Link transformations.
Oh yeah, easy.
Like,
same here.
So you have good close range, you have great like long range with like, it's fins that are boomerangs, however that works. We don't question
fins. You have martial arts that kind of work.
Yeah,
you have
the swimming's genius.
You have the good swimming. You have that electric shield.
Yep. I was about to say that. And speaking of electric shield, let's move on to the boss then. So
Wait, hold on.
Oh.
Hold on. Let's talk about the mini bosses first.
Okay.
Like Wart, for instance.
Oh yeah, screw that one.
Wart has a lot going on.
Well, too much at times. It scares me. But Wart doesn't have a lot going on.
Like, he has a bunch of blobs, how you would call them, warts, I guess.
Maybe that's why his name is Wart.
Things.
Yes.
Pink blobs protecting his main body.
Extra nipples.
There are multiple ways that you can get rid of them. Like you could use your sword, you could use arrows, you could use bombs.
Mm-hmm.
There are quite a few things that you could do to like expose his weak spot. But when he does that, he falls on the ground and starts to move quickly, and that's the part where I think it's a little too much, because it's hard to really keep track of where he is and have enough time to aim the arrow to shoot him in the eye before he inevitably rams into you.
So now, Mr. Frog himself, the two frogs. Talk about that mini boss now, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And
that frog is... I honestly find him really funny. The way that you use the ice arrows is pretty clever. Yeah. But like if he gets you in his like little goo fort,
mm-hmm.
he like does a whole like Dragon Ball Z combo on your ass.
Yeah, it's beautiful. He's probably my favorite mini boss in the game. Thinking about it.
It does a ton of damage, so it sucks when you get hit by it, but the animation almost makes up for it because it's just that good.
Exactly. Yeah, he's probably my favorite mini boss. Thinking about all the mini bosses, it's like, yeah, the frogs are pretty good.
My favorite mini bosses are in the Stone Tower.
Those are really others I was considering, but yeah. Yeah. And
mm-hmm.
I know we talked about the whole like ice arrow mechanic already, about like shooting him and it like cracks down, and then he has those blobs like bouncing around while he's jumping around. You have to avoid the blobs and go over and hit him, and then he jumps back up. You have to shoot him down again, rinse and repeat. It's so good. It's so clever, and like it makes me I don't know why, but his goop makes me think like he's like a horse rider. So he's on a horse, but it's not a horse. It's just goop. Like, it's crazy. That's what I think every time.
Now I'm just thinking of a horse made out of jelly, and he's pretending that he's a cowboy.
He probably would. But Georg,
not a big fan of Georg, actually.
Probably my least favorite
Georg.
boss.
Yeah, I'd say Georg is probably the lowest point of Great Bay Temple.
Yeah. No, definitely the lowest point.
Definitely, yeah, definitely
Not
the
even
lowest
probably.
point.
It's a very annoying fight in the sense of like, the issue is after you hit him down, after you knock him down with your boomerang fins of justice,
or an arrow.
You're right. I just keep myself in Zora Link, but I guess arrows work too.
I switch
totally
between
didn't
the two. I switch between the two forms. I shoot him with an arrow. I go to Zora Link. I go down and hit him with electricity.
Honestly, that's probably faster. But yeah, once you hit him with electricity, he summons these little babies who try to come and get you, and you have to quickly, swiftly, carefully don't miss, don't hit your head. Get back up on the platform. If you hit your head, which is very easy to do, and not get back up on the platform, its babies will get you. And it might even get you and toss you around a little. Sure, usually it eats you back on the platform, but you take a nice chunk of damage. Thanks. If you miss once. And it's not like Zora Link had an issue with, jumping. It's just in this boss fight, for whatever reason, it seems to be harder.
No, it's not
more precise.
It doesn't have anything to do with the swimming controls. It's the fact that you have to jump up to get back on the platform, and if you're not fast enough, and like you said, if you don't miss it or if you miss it or hit your head, you're either going to get shotted by his little babies, or what's the more likely scenario, he'll just jump up out of the side of the camera, eat you, and do 4 hearts worth of damage.
Yeah. Or both happen. Whoop-de-doo!
Yeah, because that's fair.
But that was pretty rare, though.
And I swear, the eating attack, its hitbox is way too big.
Yeah.
It is way too easy for him to get you. I swear, when he goes for it, it is impossible to avoid.
Mm-hmm.
When he goes for it, you're just okay, I guess I'm taking a huge chunk of damage. Thanks, game. That's fair.
Yeah. And
if it isn't that, it's just a very boring fight because it's piss easy. So it's a lose-lose situation. It's either really unfair or really boring.
Mm-hmm. And that's the shitty part about that fight. There's no way to make it enjoyable either. It's just but it's the lowest part of Great Bay. The rest of Great Bay is great. Not even great. It's greater than great. It's the Great Bay. No, it's amazing. But we're not even talking about the best dungeon yet.
Well, it's definitely my favorite dungeon.
Now, we're about to... Wait, what?
Out of the 4 dungeons, even though I love the Stone Tower a lot, I've honestly come to like Great Bay Temple more.
Really? Interesting. I can understand it, though. Because the last 2 dungeons are the best dungeons easily. But, Stone Tower... My god.
Near perfect dungeon right here.
Yeah. The epitome of what Zelda dungeons strive to be.
Yep.
Did you not? This is the... no dungeon compares to it. It's crazy. It's so good. I know that sounds like a crazy statement, but it's true. It has everything going for it. It utilizes almost every item you've gotten. It's
all 3
puzzles.
mask transformations.
Yeah, all 3 mask transformations. I don't know why I was about to jump to puzzles when I was going to say the transformations. Thank you so much for saving me. And its puzzles are if you thought the last 2 dungeons puzzles, or even the last 3, but the last 2, because the first dungeon was half of a beginner friendly dungeon. If you thought the last 2 dungeons, its puzzles were crazy, this one blows your mind with its puzzles sometimes, especially with the whole flipping mechanic afterwards, where you revisit some puzzles on the other side of the room. It's what?
And you revisit certain rooms when it's upside down, and you have to go through them again, but differently.
Yeah, and it's crazy, it's insane, it's brilliant. It makes so incredible.
It makes backtracking almost a non-issue.
Yeah. Backtracking isn't even an issue. It's just what? Oh. But, like, Stone Tower just uses everything. Its mini-bosses, the two mini-bosses, I almost said Gerudo, it's not a Gerudo.
Hired Fortress.
What? No, mini-bosses.
Oh.
Yeah.
The head of the Garo.
Yeah, the Garo. That's what they were called.
And
been a long time.
And that scythe-wielding Darkrai-looking mofo.
Yeah. With, like, the birds, with the keys all around them or something. Whatever those are.
I don't know what that boss was about.
I don't know either. But they're sick as shit.
They're so fun to fight.
Yeah.
They're... Like, remember what I said about Oldawa? It feels like a duel. Those are my favorite type of bosses. Like, they aren't that much bigger than you. They have weapons like you. They have attack patterns like you. And it's just like... Mano-a-mano. No tricks. Best warrior win.
Yup. And, my god, the Stone Tower uses so many, like, crazy mechanics and other things. Like, there's so much to explain. We would be here for a couple hours, because every room does something immensely different. Like, we were talking about how every dungeon doesn't feel the same. But I swear, in this dungeon, every room doesn't feel the same. It's like you're in a different dungeon. And I look around and go, wow, this is incredible. Like, the dungeon is so amazing. It's crazy. And it's considered like
with lava. There's a place with a bunch of water.
Yep. There's a place with just a fucking abyss.
There are a couple rooms with like mirrors that you have to reflect light off of.
Even those rooms are so good, and it's like they can be annoying, but they're so good still. You know something's good when it can be annoying, but yet you're like, oh, this is so good still. Like, holy crap. I'm pretty sure it's a lot of people's contention as the best Zelda dungeon ever. Mine included. Because
for me it's in a pretty close battle, but for me it's a pretty close battle between Stone Tower and the Spirit Temple from Ocarina of Time.
I thought you were about to say the Earth Temple, and I'm like, yeah, you know what, I agree with you. And now I'm looking at you like you're a crazy man. Spirit Temple, what? What?
Earth Temple's pretty good too, though.
I thought you were talking about Earth Temple from Wind Waker, and I'm like, oh yeah, definitely, yeah, I could see that. Or I thought you were going to say the Ancient Cistern. I'm sitting here thinking Spirit Temple.
Both of those are good choices.
That's a good choice, but also, what? Damn. Didn't expect to hear that one. That threw me a curveball. Okay. That was a curveball I wasn't expecting. Spirit Temple is very good. Though it utilizes a lot of the same things that this one does. But we're not here to talk about Ocarina of Time. Mm-hmm. That is like the peak of Ocarina of Time, though. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Majora's Mask. But like, yeah, we can't go super in detail because every room has its own thing, and that I will agree, thinking about what you just said, that is also what the Spirit Temple has. A lot of the rooms are like, it's their own room and their own kind of like puzzle, in that same way that Stone Tower is. I think Stone Tower does better, but the boss is the lowest point easily. No, hands down. Same thing with Great Bay. The difference is there's a way to actually make this boss fun and challenging, unlike the last boss. That is the only one difference, but this boss is a joke and a cakewalk if you do it the way it's intended with the Giant's Mask. Because you just hack away at Twin Mold, and they die in like 2 hits. Not really 2 hits, it's like 5 each, but still. It's very easy to just kind of overwhelm them with the Giant's Mask. But without the Giant's Masks, it's actually very interesting and a lot of fun. It can also be frustrating if you run out of arrows, though, because you're kind of shit at
what I've seen, I'll actually praise the 3D version here. It makes that fight look a lot more fun.
Yes. Yeah, I know the 3D version has a better twin mold fight. That's something I will give the 3D version, because definitely did that a lot better. But, so it's not the worst boss in the game, because that goes a great way. But twin mold is still pretty weak. But the entire dungeon is just so... And that's the thing about this dungeon, is its weakest point is the boss, but everything along with enemies, like the types of enemies you fight are... Some of them are insane in the sense of like... Damn, they stacked this dungeon with some hefty enemies. What the hell am I looking at? And like the puzzles too. There's so much of all of that the dungeon and how much of your, you know, your items it utilizes as well. You have to use like pretty much everything. That it's just so incredible because of that. And then we got the moon. It's not a mini dungeon, of course. It's just kind of like a...
It doesn't really feel like a dungeon per se. It feels more like a final stretch.
Yeah.
An optional final stretch, I'll have you know. It kind of feels wrong to not do them, though.
Yeah, especially if you get all the masks.
Yeah, especially if you get all the masks.
It's like, you gotta do them. Fuck the water one, though. That one's just a guessing game.
Honestly, I hate the Snowhead one.
The Snowhead one can be kind of difficult, but I actually kind of like it, even though I struggled with it myself.
I honestly think the pathways are too narrow for their own good.
They are. It means just get good at Goron linking. And you know what? I eventually got good at Goron linking. The Woodfall one
what
isn't
does that
really...
remind you of?
The Woodfall run really isn't much. You just hop a couple times and then you're kind of just done. There's really nothing there. The Ikana one is the only one that actually has some things. You have some fights you do, and then you have to hit an eye with different things. One's a bomb, one's like a fire arrow, one's just an arrow.
Bomb chew.
Oh yeah, I said bomb, but I meant bomb chew. My bad. But yeah, you have like those different things, and then you do that. That's the one that feels the best, because I mean, why wouldn't it? It's a little gauntlet in a way before the final fight. It's kind of cool. And then we got Majora. The moon isn't amazing in any way though. It's yeah, it's okay. It's all right. It's nothing special. It's really just kind of there to throw little trials at you so you can hand the masks
there for
in.
Shock value, really. Like, you don't expect the inside of the moon to be like this.
That too. But I know it's also about, like, you know, so you can hand the masks in to get the Fierce Deity mask, so they're not trying to make it super complicated or hard or anything. They're just like, yeah, just solve this little thing in this area, give me some masks, and that's it. You're good. Get out of here. Majora, though, interesting fight. It's not, like, super hard, but I wouldn't say it's super easy unless we're talking, like, the second phase, like Incarnation, because Incarnation just dances around, does absolutely jack all to you. You just gotta shoot it, not miss. But the first Majora is, like, where it's at its hardest with, like, the 4 masks. And Wrath can be kind of difficult at times, and at times it can be stupid easy if you could stay on it. That all kind of depends. But Majora's Mask, like the first one, is very interesting with like how you have to shoot it with light arrows, and then you have to like hit it down, and you have all those masks attacking you, and it's honestly quite a unique fight in a way too. Like the other two forms, while they're unique in their own way, they don't feel like superbly unique, if you know what I mean. Like it feels like it's still kind of been semi-done in one way or another. Well, I mean, the second form isn't really much of anything, so I guess I don't really count that one. But I mean more so Wrath. But Majora's Mask and the other four masks, there hasn't really been anything like it. It's quite unique and quite a good challenge as well.
Definitely has a lot going on.
Yeah, that too.
You have to keep track of.
Yeah. But the Fierce Deity Mask just annihilates the entirety of everything in the entire game, if you end up getting that. So there's that. If you choose to use it! There's the Castle of Ikana, and I guess you could count the Pirate's Fortress as a little dungeon too.
I guess.
If we're counting Ikana, I kind of thought about it like, yeah, I guess the Pirate's Fortress makes sense. Pirate Fortress isn't anything like incredible though. It can...
Yeah, but I really like the atmosphere of the Pirate's Fortress.
Yeah, it's very cool, but...
Especially the music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the music's great. But the fights are pretty easy, and it's pretty easy to walk around with the stone mask and just not have anything happen to you. But
yeah, the
you kind of
stone
need
mask
to.
Makes that entire place obsolete.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you get seen, you just get thrown out. It'd be nice if you could kind of like fight them, but it's okay. You have a few that you can fight, although it's not like super difficult. They're very Ocarina of Timey. They fight pretty similar.
Yeah.
So it's definitely easy to kind of figure that out. But yeah, it's still a neat mini dungeon. But Castle of Ikana is like... So we were talking about peak dungeons and what dungeons want to be. In my opinion, Castle of Ikana is a peak mini dungeon and what mini dungeons strive to be. Because damn, dude. Like...
Yeah. It feels
the
like
Ikana
a full-on
area,
dungeon, even though it's not.
Yeah, the Ikana area is just kind of like, suck it, bitches! We got the best dungeons, fuck you! Oh my goodness. Or we got what you guys strive to be, fuck you! To every other game. Like, the Castle of Ikana is really cool in the sense of, the way you traverse the actual castle, and also some of the ways you solve puzzles as well. Like that too. It's nothing crazy because it's a mini dungeon, but it's definitely a lot more creative for a mini dungeon because most of, if not all, mini dungeons are very, very, very straightforward. Like, I swear to God, it's like a first dungeon, except for when you do something like a block puzzle in like the ice cavern in Ocarina, for example.
I love blowing up the top floor with a powder keg.
Yeah, that part's great too. But there's like... It's crazy that there's actually so much inside the Castle of Ikana as well. With like... the amount of content you get in it. Even though it's a mini dungeon, so it's kind of short. But there's just a lot there with utilizing your mirror shield in that dungeon. It oh my god, the way it uses the mirror shield is beautiful. It is... I love it. It's like...
Especially with the boss fight.
Yeah, especially with the boss fight. I'd argue that's what this boss fight has up on Twin Rova, because that one's pretty simple with the mirror shield, for example. Whereas this one's very... It's a lot more I wouldn't say creative, but a lot more interesting in the way you go about it and everything. And the way you fight as well. But, yeah, that boss fight is just so good.
Yeah, he actually has a defense, too.
Yeah. Fight like the two of them, and you fight him, and you could kind of get screwed over by him, too. Because, like, he's not an easy boss. For
not
mini
at all.
dungeon, it's like, what? Again, like, that's not normal in a mini dungeon. Hey, boy, you're playing Majora's Mask. What do you think you're doing? Like, whew. But honestly, like, the Ikana area, mainly, like, the ancient castle of Ikana and Stone Tower, are, like, huge reasons. Like, the biggest reason why Majora's Mask is so popular, so good. And it's not to discredit any of the other dungeons, because, like, they're all still incredible, too. Like, they're still all super amazing.
But they just don't compare.
They don't compare, but compare stacking all of them together in one game. Well, here you go, you got Majora's Mask. Oh. Yeah. Like, hot damn. I was gonna say that, like, honestly, to me, the Castle of Ikana with the Mirror Shield is equivalent to the Great Bay with the Ice Arrows in the way it uses the Mirror Shield. Or at least close to it. Maybe not like equivalent, but close to it, because it uses that Mirror Shield so good. And so well. And some of the, like, puzzles you have to solve and everything, there's not a whole lot, again, but still, like, they're there. They exist. They're not easy to, yeah. Well, they're not super hard, because it's a mini dungeon still, so it still has that mini dungeon aspect, but it's Majora's Mask, so they're harder than usual. What's up?
No, I just said I can agree with that.
Yeah. Ugh. I thought you said I already said that, and I'm like, yeah, I did. Like, yeah, I'm admitting it. I just repeated myself. Oopsies. Well, yeah, so that is the talk about the dungeons. This one lasted a lot longer, partially because there's a lot more in these dungeons to talk about. And they're, like we were talking about it a bit, they're the biggest reason, one of the biggest reasons as to why this game is so good. So it definitely was worth talking a lot more about them this time than as opposed to, like, the story, for example, which we'll get into now. So the story from Majora's Mask is a fairly simple story when you look at it from, like, just, like, the narrow perspective of beating the game.
It seems simple at face value, but
Yeah,
as you
that's a good way to put
go
it.
as you go farther and you actually find out how it's affecting the world and its residents, you find, like, a lot of depth and how human all of these people feel.
Yeah.
Like, Majora's Mask's presentation was very ahead of its time. Very ahead of its time. It's still putting a lot of other games to shame to this very day.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
That's how good its presentation and atmosphere is.
Yeah, and like a lot of the story, as you just mentioned about the people around you, a lot of the story comes from doing the side quests and helping everybody else, especially the main big one that everybody hears about, the Anju Cafe quest. But doing all of the side quests helps you learn about every character and what they're like and what they're going through because of what's happening, and, like, and just all of that. And it strengthens the story even more. It's why Majora's Mask actually has a fairly deep and big story, as opposed to when you look at it, as you said, face value, as to Majora causing shit because of, you know, the evil in the mask, and you basically have to rescue Termina. It's much, much more than that. There's more to that. And, yeah, like, it's a really good story in that way. It's why, and a lot of these side quests require, pretty much all these side quests for the masks require, like, you know, all these side quests for the story are pretty much all off of the masks. So it's like, you don't even have to 100% the game. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, there are a few that aren't about the masks. They're about, like, heart pieces and stuff, but most of them are off the masks, which is another cool thing that Majora's Mask has. As we were talking about with, like, the transformations, there's all these masks you can use, and they all have their own, like, unique thing to them. We'll get into the issues with them in a bit, very soon, actually, but there's so many masks that have, like, very interesting things, and some of them just help you get, like, heart pieces and other stuff, and not just heart pieces. Some of them even help you learn more of the story. For example, getting into the bar at night and then playing a song. Sure, the song doesn't require you having a mask, but you need the I can't remember what the mask name was, but it's the cow one.
The Romani rat. The Romani mask.
You know, I don't know why that didn't click in my brain. Like, it's from
talk.
Romani Ranch. Of course it's going to be called Romani Mask. But I think it was going to be called something like, this is my cow, Kevin. It's the Kevin mask. Like, I don't know what the heck my brain was thinking there. I don't know. My brain's just not thinking properly. But, yeah, that's me today. I'm kind of tired.
Maybe you need some Romani.
I do. But, that's creepy.
You know, like Chateau Romani.
Yeah, sure. That's what I was talking about. You need to get in there with the mask and then, like, play the song, and there's this whole thing with is his name Ingo in this, or is his name still Ingo in this, or is it something else?
I
don't even know. But you know who I'm talking about. The Ingo-looking dude.
Just call him Ingo. I don't know what his name is.
The Ingo-looking dude.
Termina.
Yeah, I don't know either. He has his whole thing, and, like, it gets you a heart piece, but you needed the mask to get in there and do that. And that's, like, one of those examples of, like, okay, for this one you need the mask to hear more of the story. And that's also something really cool, is some of the masks help you acquire some story. So, yeah. But I love that about this game, that, like, there's just so much to unpack by doing all these side quests, and it just doesn't feel right not doing the masks anymore, too, because of it. But that's just a fun little thing to say. But it really makes you want to do that once you finally experience that story. Also, there's, like, the world as well. The world's very interesting. It's interesting how it looks in, like, the different areas. They look chaotic in a way.
They're, like, scrunched together.
Yeah, and I actually...
It's really awkward.
It looks awkward, but I actually love it for the game, because it's like Majora's causing all this chaos, and it looks chaotic, and it just feels like it fits as awkward as it looks. At least that's how I always see it. It's just like...
That's something I never considered, actually.
Yeah, it's like, he's fucking with the world, so it's like, oh my god, did you do this, dude?
That's actually a pretty good explanation. Wow. I never thought of it that way.
Well, you should start using your brain, then. That's coming from you, Marley.
Yeah,
I know, Marley.
Yeah. You are the last person I want to hear that
from. But the areas are all really cool. I honestly really like pretty much all the areas. They have a lot to them. Like, the one I find that has the least is Snowheads, because they all kind of seem a little, at least with the snow, they all kind of seem very similar. But then, you know, once the snow's gone, they're not as similar. But it's a lot of, like, the same thing with, like, just the ramps and just like a plain area and such. But like the Woodfall area is really cool with like Deku Palace and like the areas you can go to off the side and everything. Great Bay has its whole area, and then it's like Second Coast, and you know that area up there that you can go to with the beavers that we were talking about earlier, and there's a lot. There's that whole pit.
There's that giant reef with all the
reef
with all like the eels.
I said pit. I'm like, I think that's the wrong word, but it's like a pit underwater. So yeah, reef. That's what I meant. Yeah, that one. There's the Pirate Fortress, which we already talked about. There's like a lot. There's not like a whole lot to that area. It doesn't seem like it, at least. But there is. It's kind of crazy. It's a weird area in the sense of like, oh, it just seems like an endless ocean. And then you go in it and there's like all these other areas and you're like, oh, that's not an endless ocean. There's actually quite a few things in here. What the heck? And then there's like the Ikana area, where there's like, you know, the hill at the beginning, and then like that little...
That place is just filled with the dead.
Yeah. And then... yeah, the well, which... But yeah, we'll get to that later. Which sucks. And then there's like the cave, there's like the house, there's just the dead, filled with the dead area. There's Ikana Castle, like we already talked about. But then there's the whole climb to Stone Tower. And, you know, that puzzle pissed me off the first time I played through it. I thought it was dumb as fuck. Now I'm like, this is probably one of the coolest puzzles I've seen that wasn't in a dungeon. Like, this is really cool. The only thing I wish there was a skip button for a song, because playing that song so many times is annoying. That is the one thing I'm like, why is there no skip button sometimes for these songs? I mean, I get it, it's an N64 game. They're not going to have a skip button, it's going to play. You have to live with that. Don't know why there's not a skip button on the 3DS, I don't know, there might be, actually. I think there is some kind of way where it doesn't play the song multiple times, but for a song like that, it should have been programmed to not play every time. But it's okay. It's an N64 game, so whatever. That's more to I feel like a limited hardware kind of thing. So,
yeah.
As much as it's a bit of a complaint, there's nothing you can do about that one, really. But yeah, that whole climb is so sick. I love doing that climb so much. It's crazy, because as I said, I hated it before, but all the areas are very interesting, and then... Oh yeah, right. It kind of has that whole graveyard area, too, that you mentioned was like filled with the dead, unless you were talking about the other area, but there's the graveyard...
I was talking about, like, the whole place.
Oh, well, yeah, okay.
The whole of Ikana Canyon, all of the graveyard stuff, to Stone Tower, Ikana Castle, all of it. Mm-hmm. All of it is just filled with dead.
It's cool to see all this, as fucked up as that sounds, it's cool to kind of see all the struggles every kind of, like, race is going through as well. Like the Deku with the whole, like, where's our princess? Kill the monkey! To the Gorons freezing.
The entire Deku are in like disarray, not just because their princess is gone, but because the water is poisonous.
Oh yes, that's right. I totally forgot about that part.
Then like you said, the Gorons are freezing to death and
starving to death.
And their leader is death, and their leader is dead.
Yeah. And the elder is frozen. And then you got the Zora people where
the water is getting all murky and dangerous. Mm-hmm. And then the Zoras have like these pirates to deal with.
And they're losing their eggs.
Because Lulu laid some eggs, but they got stolen.
Yep. And then
Mikau died trying to get them back.
Yeah. And then there's the whole... Well, we already talked about Ikana, about, like, the dead.
And then everybody is dead in Ikana.
Except for that little girl and her father.
Mm-hmm. But her father is mutating into a Gibdo.
But he was saved by Link. Unless you didn't save him, then you can't complete the game, but he's a Gibdo, so what are you gonna do?
And honestly, the music makes everything even better.
Yeah.
And that just adds to the entire game's atmosphere. Like, if you've ever heard of the Final Hour piece, the end of the world, or just called Final Hours,
I got this
in
face
some
like when you
in some other way, in some other places, it is like despair incarnate.
Yeah.
It is one of the best musical pieces in the entire series.
It is so good.
Like, I cannot get enough of it.
And I actually...
It has priority within a lot of the game. Like, you going out into different areas, you're fighting people. Nope, you're not hearing anything else unless you're in a dungeon.
Yep.
You're hearing that same tune everywhere you go and whatever you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
That moon will not go away.
Oh, and there's also
it is so unsettling, and you can see how all of the people in Clocktown are reacting to it. Like, some are cowering in fear, some are running away, some don't even believe that the moon is falling in the first place. Some just accept it.
Every time I think about the people who don't believe, I just think about the carpenter who's laughing like, ah!
Yeah, that's the main one. That's the main one I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
If you want to fall, then fall already. Blah!
And can I talk about Clocktown as well? Like, Clocktown is... I honestly love the design of it. Like, it's so quirky and unique, but it's so interesting the way it was designed. I love it. Every day that passes, the song changes and becomes more and more, like, menacing in a way.
I love that detail.
Yeah,
like,
just
first
like
it's peaceful, then it's a little quieter. Like, something a little bit more sinister is in the background, but then in day 3 it's like everybody's in denial and panicking.
Yeah, you just hear it in the music and it's beautiful, along with the dungeons, the mini dungeons. I wouldn't say the bosses, because half of the bosses are and the other half are pretty good, so I guess half of the bosses like, they still count. And just the items themselves, and, like, the atmosphere, the world, everything we just kind of talked about, and the usage of the bow and the way it works in the dungeons, the mechanics, like, just everything, absolutely everything that we just talked about that was really good about the game. Before we get into the bad stuff, those are the reasons I think it's the best, is because of all that. It's like, the bad stuff we'll get to, but I do not think that the bad stuff holds it down that much, because of just how much juiciness there is from, like, all of this, and everything the game can do, and what you have to do in the game, and just the items, story, dungeons, like, I know I already said that, but just all of that. And the world itself, too. With the whole clock. The time going down. The pressure. It's all very, very, very well done. With the whole atmosphere and everything. And, yeah. That's why...
the best atmosphere in the series.
Yeah. That is personally why I've come to consider it the best game in the franchise. Because I will say, I honestly thought it was Twilight Princess for the longest time, too. I changed my mind, though. After I finally played Majora's Mask 100% and continued to play it. That 100% run made such a difference for me. So, I guess at this point, there's really nothing to say about combat. It's like, combat is pretty much the same as Ocarina of Time, with a few, like, improvements and tweaks here and there with, like, this isn't combat related, but jumping, for example. The jumping is so much better in this game. You don't actually have to roll to jump, he jumps. He actually knows how to jump. He learned how to jump after an entire adventure. But I guess we could talk about some of the, like, issues with the game. We were just talking about the masks, so I guess let's talk about that. How some of the masks have, like, they
very
do
limited utility.
Yeah, they have, like, one use. Some of them, there are a few that have, like, one use. There's some of them that have, like, two different uses, sure. But, yeah, some of them are very limited, and you can't use them for as much. Of course, you can use them all to get, like, the Fierce Deity mask. But some of them are quite limited in that sense.
Like whoever uses the couple's mask or the postman's hat.
Yeah, what are you supposed to use a couple's mask for? Nothing. It was just to get the rest of the story. Now you can trade it in for the Fierce Deity mask with all the other masks, like you were told. I do wish some of them had more uses, because it definitely is weird that, you know, some of them have a lot of uses, and some of them just don't. But
there's the bunny hood.
Oh, the bunny hood is always useful.
And then there's the bunny hood.
Every day, every hour. But yeah, that's a perfect example. The bunny hood, as opposed to, like, I don't know, the Keaton mask, or the couple's mask. Like, what? The couple's mask at least makes sense since it's in the final hours, and it's like, okay, you got this mask, and now you're just going to beat the game at this point. You're going to fight the final boss. But it's very unfortunate that a lot of the masks, not a lot of them, but some of them don't have a lot of uses. Because there are some of them with quite a lot of uses, even just like the stone mask being used in a few scenarios, like other than like the Pirate's Fortress. Like there are some things that can be used a little more. But of course can be, but still, yeah, it's very unfortunate, and I do wish that, you know, more masks had more uses. That would have been very, very, very nice. But yeah, that's something that I think could have been fleshed out more, and it's just very unfortunate. Another thing is Deku Link's kind of weak as shit. It's made, I think it's made very clear that he just can't do much of anything other than shoot snot and hop out of a lily pad to fly and glide.
There's a reason you are stuck as Deku Link at the very beginning of the game.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely a beginner mask to, like, start you off fresh, and the other two masks are just, like, the Zora Link and Goron Link are just so much better. And it makes sense because it's like, okay, the Deku Mask is a just like beginner friendly mask, and then once you're like into the game, and especially after Woodfall, yeah, it's pretty much obsolete until a few times at Stone Tower, and that's pretty much it. Or unless you need to do some side questing stuff or maneuvering with it for whatever reason. But usually that involves side quests.
Or if you're going through like the Deku Palace.
Yeah. But that also usually involves side quests. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of really good side quests in this game. Like my personal favorite are the whole Romani Ranch side quest. Yeah, that's my favorite.
I know we were talking about side quests before as well, and like, yeah, I did forget to mention that there's a lot of really good ones. Like, a lot of them. There's not that many that are bad. So it's another thing with that story aspect of like, you have all these side quests, and a lot of them are really good, and it helps you with the story. Holy shit, this is great. What more can I ask for? But the masks are, Deku Link is definitely, I understand what they were going for about like a mask to introduce you to the game, and then it's going to kind of be obsolete because the game's going to get harder and you're going to need the better masks, and maybe no mask because you're just stronger without Deku Link, and Deku Link is like super weak. But also it's like, I feel like they still could have tried to incorporate Deku Link at one point, you know? Like,
maybe it would have been better if they actually had like upgrades for some of the masks, and there were more upgrades for Deku Link since you had him the longest and he's the weakest of the bunch.
As weird as it would have been, to like have upgrades for some masks that seem to have little to no use, but then you upgrade them. Oh, what does this do? Oh, that's cool. And like Deku Link would be so much better. He would actually be able to do shit. Oh, I'm sorry, he could do a spin too. You want me to fucking clap my hands and give you a cookie for that? No.
And oh look, he can hop on the top of water.
Oh, I totally forgot. I should get him a piece of cake for that.
Big fucking deal. It's made obsolete once you get Zora Link.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, all of his shit is just made obsolete because the Snot, you have a bow and arrow, and you'll get a hook shot later too. The hopping on water, like you said, Zora Link, the traveling, Bunny Hood and Goron Link, faster, and Epona too. Like, there's just and like the close quarter combat again, just normal Link, or even the other two transformations, just better.
The only thing that Deku Link has going for him by the end of the game is him being able to glide.
Yeah, out of the lily pads. Yeah, that's really the only thing, and it's a little unfortunate.
Yeah, that's the only thing that you use Deku Link by the end of the game, and it's kind of sad.
Yeah, because it's like these are the main three masks, and I do wish like they were all still very important, as opposed to two of them are very important, but now the Bunny Hood is more important than Deku Link.
Like you can't even use the Deku Link statues for like pressing the switches down in the Stone Tower.
Yeah, I totally forgot about that. Yeah,
like that's what gets me the most. Like, really?
He's that light.
He's like, that light. He can't even. His statue clone can't even push down switches. You're serious?
You could have given him more if you weren't going to let him push down a switch. I mean, it makes sense about the switch, but then give him more, man. Give him something else. Make him useful. He could have other uses. Give him other uses, like we were just talking about. Upgrades. Yeah, like, for whatever reason, you know what they could have done? Because maybe it's because of the first day cycle. And because he's supposed to be so useless. But maybe after it got pulled off of your face, it got upgraded. Like, with the Happy Mask Salesman. helping you get it off your face, it gets upgraded for whatever fucking reason. They can make something up. That would be the perfect time. You're past the beginning portion, and now you can move on to the actual game, and he doesn't have to be super OP, but it at least would make him useful later on, so he's not obsolete, other than gliding for stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been a great way of incorporating it while keeping it as a, this is still a beginner mask kind of thing. Like, this is just for kind of the beginning of the game. But it'll have some uses later. Like, at least that would have balanced it out. But unfortunately, no. Another thing is, like, the last, like, really bad thing about the game. Because, like, the thing is, there's not, like, too much to say that's too bad. And while it is a short game, there's still so much that's amazing. The well is annoying as shit and everything. And
fuck the well.
Fuck the well. That one's really bad, and I give no credit to that. But the rest of Ikana is really cool. The rest of Ikana is amazing. But that's not what I'm trying to talk about. What I'm trying to talk about, because, like, the areas are really good, too. All the areas are super unique and very well constructed, well done. The only issues I tend to find is, honestly, just the well. The well's very annoying. And I love how the world looks super chaotic because, like, the areas just change into each other. It really shows, like, Majora really fucked with this place, huh? But yeah, the one other issue that I keep trying to say, but then I keep distracting myself because I keep realizing things I want to say.
It's not very accessible. Like, it's not for everyone. Like, like the way it's presented, the time limit, and and like the way it carries itself. It doesn't hold your hand. It doesn't like ease you in. Like, at the very beginning, it like forces you into a very weak form that you have to go through. It's a very slow beginning, and that often ends up turning off a lot of people. I know it's ended up turning me off, and I know it's
same.
And I
honestly.
know Twilight Princess kind of has the same problem, but with Majora's Mask, it just doesn't feel right.
Yeah, it's not like Twilight Princess where it doesn't turn you off. It's the beginning of Majora's Mask is a lot more rough than Twilight Princess is.
You could see that in Twilight Princess it's just a slow burner. But in Majora's Mask, it just like the first time you're controlling Link in his natural form, but then bam, you're a Deku. And you're like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
And then there are some other people who don't like being pressured in a game. They don't like the time limit. They don't like needing to rush with their objectives. And there are parts of it that only like hardcore Zelda fans would possibly enjoy.
Yeah, I mean,
like it's like it, and like with Twilight Princess, I think there's something in it that everybody can enjoy.
That's
or
fair.
most people can enjoy it, and it's an amalgamation of everything that the Zelda series has become. While Majora's Mask, while it does do that one that those couple things really well, like that, like the good combat, the dungeons, and the atmosphere. If you're not already into this kind of dark storytelling and atmosphere, there's not gonna be much for you here. It's not for everyone.
Yeah. Of course, everybody will like different things, but I do understand what you're saying. I was just gonna say that, like, oh shit, what was I gonna say?
Whereas in like Twilight Princess, Ocarina of Time, and Wind Waker are all more accessible than Majora's Mask.
Yeah. It's a very hard game to, like, get into if you haven't already played other Zelda games too, because it's like the puzzles and everything are so complicated, which is good, which is a good thing. This is what, like, if you're a Zelda fan, you want to play this game because you're like, oh shit. But
if you already played Zelda games, then you will love this. But for the love of God, don't start with Majora's Mask. It will overwhelm you to hell and back.
Pretty much. Oh yes. Also with the timer, I know you can slow down time. I know you can skip time and other things, but you have to find that stuff. Unless you look up unless you like look up how to actually do it, you actually have to find that stuff because it's hidden throughout the world. So that's something you also kind of
the game barely tells you about that, and
and that's something the game should tell you.
That makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Like, you have to figure that out on your own, and you're like, okay, that would have been nice to know late. Right. That would have been nice to know sooner. Especially the slowing down time one, because it's like, that can screw up so many people. Hell, I didn't even know about that playing through it my first time. I was like, damn, how are you supposed to do this in 3 days? It was hard. It was very hard. I struggled in the Great Bay Temple because of it, because what we talked about before with the Great Bay Temple. So I know that frustration myself. Yep. But I also am super shit. I was also super duper shit at puzzles. So I looked up half of the puzzles because I couldn't even complete normal Zelda games without looking up things. Because that's how bad I was like 10 years ago. So do not credit my experience. Because I'm just trash until I'm good. And I mean dumpster trash. Like, I should go out and sit in a dumpster. Until I'm good. I don't know what... Yeah, that's me, though. But that's an image.
The average person... the average person is different. The average person is more like, you know, you get the hang of it eventually. But Majora's Mask is definitely not the game to start with because it's not... Yeah, if you're getting into the series, you play this game on, like, your third, fourth, fifth go, if not later. Like, wait until you've gotten used to Zelda puzzles, wait until you've gotten used to how items work and other things in games. And I don't mean, like, how the mechanics work in the game, I mean how you solve puzzles with them in the game. Then you can jump to Majora's Mask. It's not like, you know, put it and go right away. Which is unfortunate, but also it actually makes it a really good thing too, as crazy as that sounds, because it's like, because it has that, like, level gap, right? It means veterans of the series will love this game because they'll jump into it and it'll be a challenge. And the dungeons are so good and complex that it'll be a challenge and so much fun for them. New players can't experience that unless they've gone through a few games, so that's unfortunate, but it's also, like, sweet. You have something to look forward to in a way of a really challenging, yet really amazing game with the dungeons, the story, the way the items are used and everything. So yeah, but I don't understand that song shit though. That's something that, like, the salesman should have told you, an NPC should have interrupted you and told you, somebody should have told you. that you could do things like that. Or you open it up and you have a area in your menu that tells you the songs for the Song of Time. Like the multiple songs you can play with the Song of Time. The 3 different versions, once you get it. Like, you should have an area like that that tells you the 3 versions in your menu. That'd be perfect. Yeah. Nobody has to tell you anything. All you have to do is go and look. It's so easy to find. But yeah, I think that's one way of solving it. Unfortunately, the game is not that way. But, yeah. Sorry, I went on a little bit of a rant there about that song one.
I mean, it's warranted.
Yeah.
That's one of the game's
biggest issues.
Biggest issues that you didn't think would be that big of a deal, but it really is. Like, it makes the game a lot more manageable.
And like, it's fine. Once you know it, sure, but like, who's gonna know it right away unless they've been told or something? Pretend the internet is down or something, and now you have to figure it out yourself. Like, what? You shouldn't have to rely on that kind of stuff, but yeah, it makes the game, like you said, a lot more manageable, and it makes it more fun than stressful, because why is this clock so fast? What the heck? Why can't I skip to the next day? Although there are people you could talk to, and of course, if you talk to NPCs, you're fine there, and you can figure out the double time later. But the other ones
legit triples your time.
Yeah,
it goes from you have 1 hour of real time into 3 hours.
Mm-hmm. So to wrap things up, as I mentioned, like the dungeons, the mini dungeons, quote unquote, because through the moon in there, the story, the items and the way you use them, the world itself, and like the atmosphere with the songs and everything too, is why I think it's the best. Even though it has its issues with the masks, the whole accessibility, and the issue with the songs, which I do personally think the songs is the most prominent issue overall, because the accessibility is somewhat it's fixable, even though it's not accessible to everyone. Once you play a few games and get used to Zelda puzzles and such, now it's accessible to you. It's unfortunate that that's the way you have to go about it, but the game is that challenging that that's the way you have to go about it. That's why I still think it's the best Zelda game, though. I think those downsides don't hold it down too much as it is a short game as well. Like shorter than some of the others, especially the 2 that we've talked about, especially the last one. Talked about, actually going to talk about one of them the next time. That is all. Thank you, Scourge, for joining me. And thank you guys for watching.
Been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been fun. And we're going to be back next time with our
runner-up.
Yeah, we'll be back with next time with that runner-up, like Scourge said. So stay tuned for that. We're going to explain, why we think it's worth mentioning and everything. And yeah, that is all. And I'll see you guys next time.
Peace!